be covering most of the answers to the questions. However, there might be some questions that we may not be able to cover during the conversation. So the first 45 minutes we'll be trying to address the questions. And in case you feel that your question is still not answered, please feel free to put it on the chat box. And last 15 minutes, we'll just devote on the questions that are coming on the chat box. We want to make sure that you take value, you get the answer to the question that you came for. So first of all, let me start the conversation formally. Thank you so much, everybody, to join. Welcome, Lynn. Welcome, Paras. Let me introduce Paras and Lynn. Unfortunately, our third panelist, Ram, had to drop at last minute because of, he pulled his back and he was in pain. So, we didn't feel like, pulling him unnecessarily here. So blessing him all the rest and continuing this conversation with Lynn and Paras. So Paras, Dr. Paras is a life and leadership coach and a mental health worker in private practice and a coach trainer with Coach Arya. He works with corporate for training and leadership interventions and runs a CSR firm called Tattva Mitra. And Tattva Mitra is a Sanskrit word which means your friend. His famous tagline is inspire self, empower others, and transform generations through thinking, feelings, and actions. And he has won an EMCC award very recently and was a Young Leader Award from ICF last year. And Lynn is an MCC coach and has a PhD in organization systems. She has been instrumental in supporting organizations to create coaching culture and has been on panel of ICF Prism Award, which basically recognizes the organizations who are creating change and tangible results through coaching culture. She's also a founder of Black Tusk Leadership Firm and supports high-level executives to create bigger impact. So that's our panelists. Welcome to both of you once again formally, and really looking forward for this conversation. So, so the conversation basically is why coaching culture and what is coaching culture, right? When we say coaching culture, it is a broad spectrum. And the key question which comes to mind is, what do you mean by coaching culture? So how do you respond to that, Lynn, in very simple words, when we have to say coaching culture? What does it really mean?
Thank you for that question. For me, what it means is it's more than just offering coaching to a few people in the organization or certain people in the organization. It really is something that is fully embedded, ideally, in the organization. So typically it would start at the top where the senior leaders are participating in coaching, and they also use coaching skills. And there's an accountability around being coach-like in the organization. And so that's built into the HR systems, whether it's performance reviews or the way that people's performance is measured and rewarded and so on. And it's just a way that people start to interact with each other. That's more about listening, asking questions, and believing that people are knowledgeable and competent, just holding that kind of mindset in the organization. And I'd say finally also it's an interest in having a growth mindset where people are supporting each other to be the best they can be.
Interesting. So you're saying the people, the kind of, or the type of, the texture of conversations are very different in those organizations who have coaching culture. Interesting. And we are in crisis, and there are a lot of organizations who haven't really and what we see in, at least in India, is that a lot of organizations using coaching may not have built the culture, right? And maybe we are not at that curve of maturity yet. So what do we do? I mean, we are not in a position right now to say, hey, let's start from scratch and build coaching culture at every level, go to each and every employee, change mindsets. We are at a very different position where we're using coaching, but it's like fractions or maybe 5% or maybe not that. So what's your recommendation for such organizations or professionals? And we have a lot of external coaches on the call today, business partners and people. So what's your recommendation for them? Because I'm sure in crisis, we may not even start building a culture. So what do you say to them?
Yes, I think we have to start wherever we are. I mean, it's ideal if the coaching culture has been in place for some time. But if that's not there, just recognizing the value of people slowing down to be present for one another, listening, being empathetic, hearing each other out, perhaps helping reframe things for colleagues. And if you've got external coaches, that's great because they usually bring wonderful experience in coaching skills per se, and they bring that kind of external perspective because they're not caught up in the actual internal operation of the organization. But you also have your internal coaches, and people can learn to be coach-like with each other to help get each other through.
Yes, Lynn, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You froze for a moment there.
Yeah, I think some connection.
What I said?
Yeah, I heard that people in the organizations can be coach-like and embed those behaviors. So if we have to further simplify that, what does it mean on a daily basis for internal coaches and there are organizations who do not have experimented with coaching yet, right? And there are organizations who have some external coaches. There are some organizations which have some internal coaches. So it's like it's existing in patches, correct? Now,
Yes.
if we start from an organization who's not yet invested in internal or external coaching, what are the simple things daily they can start doing which can help them survive these crises?
Well, again, I think, ideally it starts at the top. So you have leaders demonstrating these kinds of behaviors like, just listening to people instead of just, reacting and getting into doing, but to actually slow down and be in conversation and be really present with one another. And so modeling that for others in the organization, and just people recognizing that we're human beings first. And while there's this desire to get back and, create whatever the next normal looks like, we also need to be there for each other wherever we are. And that will help give us the resilience to create the next phase in the business.
Interesting. So basically, the behaviors that coaches exhibit are the ones, especially like listening. And I think you don't need to be a coach to listen better to people, and you don't need to be a coach to ask questions. So let's start from there and start removing any kind of judgments while having conversations with people. Slowing down is anyway now an enforced scenario right now. Everybody's slowed down because of coronavirus. So how do we utilize this time to being more mindful and having better conversations with your people, right? Taking care of the mental health of each other, and how do we really change the paradigm, because this is an opportunity that we have got. Great. Paras, I would like to ask you as to what would be your recommendations at this point in time for organizations when they're struggling through a lot of psychological issues?
I think with this pandemic that we all experiencing, a lot of members in the organization, the employees, you're facing their internal demons, where it's not about just what I'm externally experiencing, it's about how am I connected to my internal fears. So I feel what the organization needs to start understanding and exploring back is employees are having a lot of fear. There would be a sense of dissonance in their own self as a whole. So So, and the other end, when Lynn was talking about coaching culture, I was also thinking about from my end, being India as a hierarchical space, like an Asian countries, if you look at, is a lot of hierarchical system that we have. How is coaching to be injected in this whole culture? Because there needs to be, today if I see a lot of generational gap between Gen X and Gen Y and Centennials who are coming across. And there's a lot of need for having that culture of empathy and listening. So from telling to sharing or exploring is something I see how organizations are ready. Some of them are, yes, they're ready at small pieces. But when we look at a system as a whole, okay, how much ready are we to start with having a culture, which is very, very big spectrum for me. Maybe something that really comes out loud to me at this point of time where organizations can look at is having open communication, how they could take look at with their team members to have more group discussions on areas which are psychological in nature, which are more at the unconscious spaces. Maybe we require some more trained professionals. However, the L&D team or leadership team could pull in people who are interested to support mental health work and probably train them or create a space where maybe I think Carl Rogers purely talks about empathy and unconditional positive regards. Maybe those are so natural within us. So just sharpening that saw and helping employees to open up and share their spaces. Because the moment we talk, the moment we name it, we tame it in our brain. So it's not like a grandiosity of very big thing. It could be just that, okay, this is something which is easy, we could get going with. So I think for me, open communication and more of group discussions at a regular intervals would help a lot the organizations to fight back not just the organizational concern or the environmental concern, but also the internal battle, what people are going through today. I'm doing a lot of crisis counseling and coaching work, and what I'm learning is that there is a lot of internal fears that people are connected to. So bringing the culture or bringing the sense of coaching culture can really change the game today. And I think it's just a matter of how do we move from telling to sharing, or we move from fixation to exploration stage. Maybe.
Okay, so I'm hearing that there is a different kinds of fears which are setting in because of the crisis, be it worry about the job, or be it what's going to happen to the company, whether it is economy, or how will we get back, and can I even meet my colleague anymore, or all those kind of the fears. And what I'm hearing from both of you is that it is important that we address those fears, and that's also part of coaching culture, because coaching culture is not only about resolving what the leader has got into the session, but actually also managing the psychological safety of people in the organization. Great. It'll be interesting to know from both of you as to what are other organizations doing. I understand Google has something going on in this regard, and there are so many other organizations doing different things to protect the mental safety and psychological safety and take care of people really at this moment. What are the things that come under the umbrella of coaching culture? What are you noticing, Lynn?
Well, one example that you just gave with Google that they've actually had in place for some time, it's not just as a result of the pandemic, but they have a process by which employees can volunteer to be peer coaches for one another. So if excuse me, an employee, sorry, my voice.
No worries.
If an employee is coming back from pat leave or mat leave, and or they've gone through some kind of family crisis recently, and they are willing to sit down and talk with other people in the organization who are experiencing something similar, they can be of help to those people. As Paris mentioned, though, there is a skill set that's involved. I mean, we can listen and we can ask questions and withhold judgment and a lot of coach-like behaviors, but it really helps if the organization can also provide some training to their staff around coaching skills, so that they understand the difference between that, telling, because that can be done with good intentions, but it's, more advice giving than actual coaching, which isn't always as helpful.
Interesting. Interesting. So essentially we're saying listen. In simple words, just listen to each other, provide space for people to speak and express, whether it is a one-to-one format or group format. All right. And so that's about the internal support that the organization can provide to each other. What can and we have so many external coaches on the call today, and they're curious to know. I've received questions about what can they do right now, because I'm sure organizations are not in positions to fund coaching initiatives. So what small contribution they can do, because I'm also hearing that we as external coaches are also not getting good response from the company, because they're thinking that we're going for business, maybe we are just going to support, and that's not being taken well. What do we do? How can we still support?
Well, I can share what I'm doing because I've run into the same thing. I'm an external coach. And so part of what I've been doing in this time is using the opportunity to sharpen my own saw. As people who provide a lot of emotional handling with people, we need to make sure we take care of our own selves and our own fears and our own well-being. And it is a time when we can do some of our own development. I've also been running some coaching supervision circles. So coaches who come together collaboratively to provide reflective space to help each other as coaches. So that's kind of just looking after the self as instrument, but also I've been doing quite a bit of pro bono work. There are organizations that are struggling and really need coaching support. There's leaders who are trying to calm the waters and be as resilient and hopeful as they can be, and they need some help right now. And they are actually very grateful to have coaching offered at reduced rates or pro bono, I'm finding.
Interesting. Paris, what are you noticing?
What I'm actually looking at it is, I come from a space of what gives me happiness is when I'm working. And this is a time when I would come across where I would not be paid, but I would be working, or I would be paid less. But what is the value I'm creating for myself? And also let's look at from a business point of view. Yes, I'm a businessman. I like to work and earn for myself. I've done a lot of credentials. But at this point of time, what I'm looking at here is maybe what gives me more happiness and pleasure and satisfaction is when I'm working, when I'm doing something. And second is maybe I may need to change my strategy. Maybe I need to look at more, how can I create a space and importance of coaching, the magic of coaching in the organizations who believe or who are not so clear about how coaching works. So maybe I would like to intervene by bringing it to them that, okay, this is what I can offer you. And maybe up to you if you would like to pay with the way, whatever it works. If it doesn't work, can I keep a slot where I could contribute coaching? Maybe I would like to explore that. Yes, I liked Lynn's space of sharpening your saw, because if I don't work at all, I will go crazy. That will connect me to my internal demons. That will connect me to my fears of existence or whatever fears I could live with. And it would impact my whole cycle. But if I'm doing something, that will change. Maybe there are environments where I need to survive, and my survival is not just on the value of money, but value of existing for doing something that gives me more of my own existence. And I think that's one of the ways that I feel many coaches can explore in, of how you do things, you could get strokes or a level of satisfaction that you've done something. And maybe it may further collaborate with a brand of you working, and people like to work with you because It's like in crisis, whoever helps me, I would love to be with that person. So not an intention of doing it intentionally for that motive, but maybe I would like to look at how can I be more useful to people or resourceful to people. And this pandemic has only taught me very big thing is that just be ready to share your resource, to give it to your people. I've gone back to many of my old clients by just emailing it to them. If you need me, just let us know. We would be able to support you in the best of our capacity. And being mindful about my boundaries while working, but at the same time, I want to reach out and be supportive, because this is a time where organization needs coaching, not from a space of solving problems, but on a space of somebody being there, on a space of humanity that was Lynn brought in the room, that I think we all need to look at from that space. It will give something, it will change over a period of time. I mean, something that's where I'm in that space right now when you ask me that question. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm hearing and adding to my own thoughts is, number one, take care of yourself, because you have been devoting a lot of emotional energy to your clients and to people around. Build your own skills and offer whatever you can offer. It may not be a pure coaching, it may not be the same framework that you offer, but just be more human at this moment and not worry too much about a lot of things. And I'm reminded of what Jack Ma is telling us, that if this year you survive, don't worry if your business don't grow. It's just worry that you stay alive, which is like a very loud and clear message, is that let's be more human this time and support as much as you can, whatever you can. If you survive, it's an investment in your relationships. If you don't, then you have done something good, right? So very open and very loud messages which are coming from across the world. It's a time that we all step up and move out of our I'm just lacking a good word, move out of and expand our role of coaches and be coaches in the real world, support people around us and see how we can do. I have a question which is on the chat box. It says, Deepak is asking me, how can coaching culture be inculcated as a part of organizational development interventions, especially during crisis? How would you like to respond to that? Lynn, maybe you can help me.
Well, for me, coaching is just integral to organization development to start with. It's a perspective that's about what can we do together in order to make things different and better. And so, particularly during a time of crisis, that us taking the time to get people's perspectives on things, listening to their ideas, moving together in step, thinking about not just where we're going next, but what's going on right now, unpacking the current experience of people, and then engaging in transformation in a way that pays attention deeply to the human part of that, not just the systems and processes that need change. But truly listening to one another and inviting in people's perspectives so that we move forward together. And it's a partnership. Yeah. I also want to just underline that whole psychological safety side of things that Paris brought up, because I think that's another really important part of having people feel like it's safe to put forward their ideas and participate in the changes taking place.
Interesting. Paris, do you have something there? You're on mute.
Hello? So for me, what I look at is that this crisis is something which we use the word crisis because there is no backup happened. So when I look at coaching as a space where how it can operate or survive or exist, maybe new strategies needs to be formed or new plans needs to be created in how to, because government is teaching me a lot more about this lockdowns, is teaching me strategies of how they are they're managing things, whether successful, not successful, I don't know about that. Need to look at what kind of strategies in terms of coaching can be brought in, because when we talk about culture, it takes time, okay? But uniqueness that we can bring in the room is mainly for having a lot of listening to conversations, and also creating spaces where people feel safe and happy and content, because now it's a space where people are going to come across about my jobs, whether will I be there or not there today, tomorrow, but maybe a space where open communication and a care for people would just help us to survive through. And one good thing that I've learned about people is we all adapt to things over a period of time. So maybe a new adaptation techniques that we may need to use by bringing coaching in the room.
Interesting. So I'm hearing compassion, and I'm also noticing that this is a time for organizations to reorganize and look at what they have been doing. Because when we are in the churn, we basically, not churn in terms of people, but when we're actually running through the schedules, there are a lot of processes that we create. And crisis is the time when you get to know what exactly is necessary, what is must to have, and what's good to have, and what's extra. And this is a time to reorganize and really cut the crap and say, hey, just focus on the necessary stuff, and create something new, create new processes which are more useful from the new normal perspective. Very interesting. I have Manu Kumar asking me, it has been often noticed that good leaders may not be good in coaching or vice versa. He's requesting Lynn to share her views on it. Why is that at times leaders, managers, and even coaches fail to play the role of successful coach, especially during the crisis or during work pressure? That's a very interesting question.
Well, I love that question. And my dissertation research, my doctoral research was on abrasive leaders. And, you know, there are some leaders that are very intense personalities. And when that is coupled with a time of crisis where there's huge pressure and a lot of change going on, that can exacerbate that quality of them as an individual. And so they don't show up as their best selves as leaders. And even though they get things done, they are not actually conducting themselves as good leaders. And that's a problem, because people can be afraid to come forward with ideas or sit down and listen to them if they should even try. So, you know, you may not be able to turn that leader around. Hopefully a good coach can help them recognize the impact that they're having, because sometimes they do not realize how tough they're being on all the people around them, or how they're having difficulty emotionally regulating themselves. So a good coach can work with them on that. Sometimes if you have good people around that leader who can also support the group and give them what they need if they're not getting it from the leader, that can be extremely beneficial, just to kind of calm things down and help people manage around that individual. Not a good long-term strategy, but it's one that can be helpful. But yeah, it's, you know, one of those things, and often those senior people do not have anybody who sits them down and say, hey, you know, you're being pretty tough on all the people around you. I know it's a tough, intense time, but this is really detrimental.
And I think I will draw another clear that this time, the guy on the top himself is stressed. There are a lot of fears, there are a lot of worries, there are a lot of anxiety, which the leader is himself going through. And can we all, be cognizant of that and offer support and say, hey, we understand, because that's what is making them react in a very different way. And crises are called pressure cooker situations, right? That's when a real character comes out. So how do we internally, and I need not to be a coach to support my leader. I can just have a normal conversation to be able to support that leader, because maybe a team member can actually go up to the leader and say, hey, I see you stressed. Is there something we can do as a team? it's a time that we all support each other and not really only look at the leaders to say, hey, you run the show, because it's everybody needs to run the show right now. It's a crisis situation. Interesting. Okay, so Manu is asking us, what is one aspect that differentiates between coaching and leadership? At the same time, what is one aspect that links coaching and leadership? Okay, going back to academics. How would you like to respond to that?
Well, I think there's a kind of leadership that's coach-like. So the leader still provides the vision, the direction, and the parts of things that move things forward, but the leader also is capable of listening, tuning in, inquiring, and drawing on all the strengths and capabilities of the team around him or her. So I tend to see both important. Yes, there are times when the leader needs to be very directive and decisive. However, the leader also wants to have in their quiver the ability to consult with others around him or her, unless they happen to be a one-person show, which is not typically the case with a leader. They have a team for a reason. I don't know if that answers the question, but I do see good leadership as being coach-like or having that capacity.
Yeah, and I think these are not two different things. A leader needs to be a coach. It needs to have a hat of coach in their own role. But how much are they playing and aware of about it is something that they need to understand. So they are not two different entities altogether. Okay, I have more questions and hence I'm going on them. So Aida asks us, you were discussing about organizational investing money on coaching. What about them, particularly those who do not have a culture of coaching, understanding the positive impact of investing time while they affirm they have so many things to do? So I think this is a conversation that we were just doing before this as to what do you do if organizations do not have the budget right now to invite coaching interventions. So how do you support as a coach? Is there anything additional from what we discussed? Otherwise, I'll repeat for Aida as to what we discussed.
Well, I think that what Ida's underlining here is that sometimes organizations are just so busy doing and trying to survive and fix, like they can barely lift their head up to even consider something like coaching. It's not occurring to them right now. They're just trying to put their finger in the dike and keep things together. And really to start to shift that perspective needs an intervention, at least with someone who has some influence, who if they experience coaching, may see the value of, you know, when I step back and I'm more reflective, I actually make better decisions. Or when I slow down and I actually engage in some self-care and I'm more aware of what's going on inside of me, like Paris was saying, I can tame those fears that are grabbing me and throwing me into action and be more thoughtful about where I'm trying to take things. But it's difficult because the adrenaline can be carrying the organization forward so fast that they're not slowing down to think about how are we doing this and how is it affecting the people around us.
Yeah, I think it all again goes back to the leaders on the top and their awareness about the information available to them about coaching, the benefits of it, and saying, hey, I'm willing to experiment at this moment, whether I'm paying for it or not paying, all kind of coaches are available. So what am I going to do right now? I have Nikhil asking me a question about what are some simple steps to follow to establish trust with the audience or team or colleagues before embarking on a coaching journey? I believe most people may resist without trust.
So for me, when I look at trust, is it from my head or is it from my heart? So for me, I look at trust as a feeling, and a feeling which is not just created in the moment with the person, but over the years. Maybe I've been working with a colleague or employees for for so many years. So there is a natural trust that I have built up over a period of time. Maybe in this crisis situation, I'm being tested on that. How am I structuring and structuring in a way of working? What happens to me when I'm in a crisis situation? Do I just hit the struggle button or the structure button and become more reactive, or there is a trust feeling that is there between my teams, and I know that it's a tough time. It will all sail through. So maybe I look at trust as a feeling which is there for. It's not just today I look at somebody and say I trust you, but for me, it's personal concept of trust is it takes time when I connect to the person. It's the energy that I work with the person for a long time, and there is a predictable pattern there. So I look at trust as a feeling, and these tough times, we're just assessing how we can collaboratively work together.
Thank you, Paras. I think the question was more about if somebody needs to start on a coaching journey,
Okay.
how do we build maybe a comfort with them to say, hey, it's safe to go through this journey.
Well, I was going to add, I think we need in these times to create swift trust. And we don't have, sometimes the luxury of testing our relationship over time. And so one of the things is, as Paris was saying, is starting off with a mindset of wanting to trust and thinking the people around me do have this competence. That's why they were brought to the team in the first place. So to give people the benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. But that's kind of an individual thing. Certainly leaders can help build trust by being authentic without, falling apart in front of their team, but being straight with people, what information they can share, their own experience of what's going on. When we show up as a real person, and when we say something's confidential, we keep it confidential. Those are the kind of things that start to build trust pretty quickly. But if somebody has a history of not being trustable, then people aren't going to open up to them in a coaching conversation or any kind of conversation, really.
Yeah, and I think part of the also equation is for people to know what it brings, right? A lot of times we see that coaching is perceived as a correction, while it's really not a correction; it's a development. And a lot of our clients take time to understand that. So how do we establish that perception before the journey, and how do we create that understanding that this is not to fix you, this is basically to support you become better, can also help. Awesome. Let's move forward. What kind of issues have been on the rise or emerging more than any other issue that requires coaching during this time of crisis, and how can coaching help them? And I think we have discussed about the psychological fears, people not feeling safe in the environment, worrying about economy, job, even depression setting in a lot of people, people worrying about their own work, or people are going through Zoom anxieties or virtual anxiety so much on the screen. All these kind of issues are cropping up, and the way we all already shared is how do you listen to people? How do you give them the space to express, to relax, to take care of their mental health, and basically providing that space of relaxation and expression is what really we are recommending as a team. I'm actually more mindful about all the questions, so that I just covered this one. There's another question in the chat box. It says, this crisis is a first for everybody, organization and also for coaches. So what are those couple of principles you're following to keep things sane at your respective end? I think a bit of repetition here. Lynn said about how do you start taking care of yourself as coaches, develop your skills, go through supervision. Supervision is a great place for coaches to feel better, at the same time improving as a coach, and investing in your own mindfulness, and in staying taking care of yourself while you're taking care of others. So awesome. All right. Yes.
If I can just add to that, Jad, that I really think that's an important question, because often people who do this kind of work are handling a lot of emotional stuff that's coming at them, and it can be hard to hold space for that all day long if you don't engage in your own self-care, whether that's getting enough sleep and proper nutrition, mindfulness, as you said. We really do need to take care of ourselves in order to be present for all of that's coming our way these days. So thank you for that question. I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel it's a lot happening for us at the same time, being human beings. So while we're fortunate enough to have the skill of coaching, this is very important that we basically, it's like double care, right? You're giving half care to others. So how do you take care of yourself? Okay, I'm actually very interested to cover all the question, and hence rushing a bit, and I'm looking at the time too. There's a question which says, can young leaders be effective coaches? Is skillful coaching connected to expertise or experience, or none? How would you like to respond to that?
I think that's a big question I'm struggling in my life as well. Um, my basic belief about, does wisdom come by age or come by awareness in life? So I think it all depends upon what is your psychological age, and how much curious are you to work with different people? How comfortable are you to um, take risk while working with people? And young leaders, I like the word young, and also like the word leaders. Today, many organizations and European companies that I see, that they have changed their leadership style. They're not looking at 2025, they're looking at 2040. That means they are looking at, currently they have changed their leadership style from leadership position of CEO of who is 51, 52 to somebody who is 38, 40. That means there is there is a paradigm shift happening, not just locally, but globally as well. So young leaders can be great leaders, great coaches. The only one filtration that we may have a challenge that I had in my life, after I did my MCC and other coaching credentials, I felt I could just get everywhere. But hierarchy is a part of our culture, in the rich Indian culture. It takes time for people to accept you as a leader or a coach. So maybe it's more about how you come across, how you communicate, but you do not need to have a facade of something, or maybe your executive self. Maybe just be yourself, and it works with time. That's what I've realized with my own experience as well. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. What would you like to add?
I was also going to add that, as we know in coaching, it's not about having the answers. It's about creating the space in which people can do their own self-reflection and become more self-aware and develop plans to move forward in things. So we don't need to necessarily have had that much experience in the corporate world to be able to provide that. And in fact, sometimes having a lot of knowledge can get in the way for leaders, because they're more inclined to want to tell how they would handle things. That might not be a problem so much for a young leader, provided they've got the mindset of wanting to be helpful to another person and listen.
Yeah, and I like the phrase psychological age. What's your psychological age? That's very different from your real age. And the struggle that I myself had was, and actually it was, I see that as a blessing that I did not have a lot of experience when I got into coaching, because that did not really created bias in me. I'm just curious to ask questions, and I'm there to explore, and there is no hierarchy which is setting in the mind. So I think it, in a way, it is very helpful to be a young coach in a lot of respects. And no offense to senior coaches, because there is advantage that everybody brings.
Yeah, I would add that because I came from senior leadership business background, that was helpful to me as an executive coach because I understand the pressures executives face. So that is helpful, not to take away from that. I just wanted to emphasize that. The thing is, some people, back to Paris's point, they get stuck in a mindset of achiever, expert, and they don't really evolve vertically in terms of their emotional maturity to a place where it's not so much about them and it's more about the development of other people. That's what's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. My next question is, what measures are required to be taken in the unorganized sectors that will enable the leaders to be successful coaches and provide support to employees in the right direction? How would you like to respond to that?
So I gather by unorganized, you mean there's no internal coaching group or process in place?
I think unorganized here means the NGOs and the social sector.
Sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
The NGOs and the social sector. I'm assuming
Okay.
that, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, right now I've been doing quite a bit of work with those kind of organizations on a pro bono basis. And other coaches I know who have done work with those organizations in other ways before, whether it was organization development or whatever, have reached out to them and offered to bring coaching services pro bono. And even if it just starts with the leadership team in those organizations, if they're willing to invest the time, if not, the money, certainly it takes some time to do coaching and be committed to it. That can be extremely helpful, and it's a way to start.
Yeah, I'm aware of a lot of initiatives going on to support NGOs and social sector, and we see that as a history, we see that they highly appreciate the support. It's just that money is always a problem for them. So, then it comes to us to say, hey, should I offer support irrespective, or should I wait for them to get ready? Awesome. All right. I have a question from Sudeshna saying, Swift trust is great, but it may not forthcoming from the people who need to trust. So how do we make that happen?
I think I maybe spoke to that earlier in that sometimes it is difficult to establish trust if you haven't experienced it in the past. But what leaders can do, and they bring the weather in an organization when it comes to trust, is be authentic, be forthcoming, hold confidences when they say they will, and basically imbue that as a value in the organization, not by what they say, but by what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes back to the history of relationships as to what has been the weather of the leadership in the organization, because history do follow when there are new investments done or new interventions done or any kind of new conversations taking place. Great, thank you. Pritika is asking me, if organizations have to invest at coaching at the moment, where do you see them investing, which level, taking into consideration the organization's maturity and survival?
I think for the projects that I'm currently taking is mainly for management level, and that too they are limited. So personally, when I'm experiencing about organizations, they have stopped or they have reduced, I would not use the word stop, they've reduced the interventions from external coaches. So currently what I'm looking at is more on group coaching, and that's where the coaching is moving to individual to group, or we say team coaching. So a lot of projects that they are in the pipeline are coming in the space of organization, more looking at the space of group coaching, or senior management, or middle management is very little what I see, but the culture and the trend I see more turning towards group coaching and team coaching. So looking at the trend for the next, wow, say about 2 to 3 years, what I am really looking at, I would get more projects which are team coaching based over individuals. So the shift from one to many, to organize and to get their goals met, or aligned to the vision of the company or somewhere. So I see the change from individual to groups now, with different levels as well, not just the senior management.
Interesting. Yes, Lynn.
I see that as well. And I would say that team or group coaching is most effective when the leader of the team is engaged in coaching. So if that combination can be there. I think someone asked earlier about how do we bring coaching into OD interventions. And that would certainly be an example of that, because we're often coaching the sponsor of some kind of transformational change initiative. And then extending it out to the team who's involved can be really powerful as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think more and more request on team coaching is only proving that it's beneficial, but it's expensive. So balanced way to do is, hey, let's see who are my top leaders who need one-to-one intervention, and can I cover most of my people through a group intervention so that I get the benefit of what coaching brings. So that's interestingly happening. And we also obviously seeing that there are a lot of internal coaching skills building happening. Internal coaches are coming up and they're serving the organization. So in a way, it's a very good scenario for coaching as a service. And I'm sure a lot of organizations who were invested in it, or who understand the importance of it, are actually leveraging that support at the moment. I have a question from who says, given the current challenges, you mentioned depression, fear, uncertainty too. Do you think therapists, counselors can do a better job as compared to coaches? I think, Paras, you have an answer to that already.
So for me, I think we all have our roles to play when it comes to a counselor or therapist or a coach. Maybe if the person is coming with a high depression symptoms, or the assessment comes across that is not workable, or when you assess when you're talking to the first meeting, your first contact with the client, how is the client coming across? If the person is saying I'm depressed or I'm feeling depressed, maybe feeling depressed could be just a grandiosity of sadness. So I would look at, we both have options to look at where the client wants to go, and if there are clinical issues which are noticeable right at the beginning of the conversation, maybe a good idea to go to a therapist or a counselor, because I do offer both. A lot of my clients are coming for social and psychological issues rather than more clinical issues. So it all depends upon your questioning and your care towards your client. We all can do a great job there, I believe.
Thank you. And I also believe that this is a time that, being a coach, I should also have access or connection with some of the therapists and counselors, so that if somebody is reaching out to me and I'm not the right person, I should be able to direct them so that they get support. And rather than saying, hey, I'm not the right person, or trying to do it when I know it's not my role. Yeah, awesome. Let's move forward. We have Kamal asking us, someone shared with me today that you should have been an accomplished corporate professional yourself in order to be able to coach leaders. I think we have addressed this question already. I'll move forward in interest of time. How can we make online coaching, which appears to be the future of coaching, more effective? Interesting question. I think we are all pushed to do online coaching. So what's your response there? How are you managing your practices?
I would say that there is a place for online coaching when it comes to reflective thinking and maybe articulating action plans and so on. But I combine that with video conferencing or some way to actually talk to one another. I find that's much more powerful than just online. I don't know about you, Paris.
For me, I guess the word effective is a very critical word for me, which I'm processing it. I look at as a coach, am I the same when I'm meeting the client in the room or in the virtual room? There are limitations and there are pros and cons for both these spaces. But how effective and how present are you as a coach in the room? I think that's more going to make the session interactive and go deep dive into the spaces of limiting beliefs and values and things about clients. So an effective coach is a self-reflective question that I want to ask every coach, including myself, that am I present in the moment with the client, whether it's online or could be a face-to-face.
Yeah, and something that I see working in online coaching, because most of my work is virtual, is I make sure that we are doing something, in the sense there is some scribbling happening, there's some work on PPT happening, we're sharing the screen, because that helps me hold the attention of my client and mine also. So we are working together and there is some typing work going on, which actually tremendously has helped all my clients to keep their attention and say in the end that, hey, I got something today. Because a lot of time in the conversations we get lost, we go to different worlds in our thinking, something distracts us, some phone call comes, or if it is an audio call, then I don't even know if I'm holding the attention of my client. So the key to offline, online, both coaching is how can I keep the attention of my client in the conversation, and obviously my own attention in the conversation without any distraction. So that has been extremely helpful. Okay, Sindhu is saying crisis is so much about how it impacts the mind. How are coaches obliged to coach people tipping towards depression or other psychological disorders due to stress and fears? What is our role in this context, and where do we step in and where do we draw the line? Very similar to what we just discussed. Is there anything additional you would like to add there?
Maybe if they the space about what is it clinically, how the person is coming across to you, maybe that's something which I would look at, how the client is coming to you, whether it's coming from a space where you find the client is very resourceful and wants to connect. Maybe I would love to do coaching, or else counseling or therapy. Clinical therapy could be ideal for people if are noticing psychotic behaviors. So I would probably not take that client. Even personally, I don't take clients who are into psychotic behaviors. Otherwise, coaching has worked well for even addictions. So I believe that maybe an unconditional positive regards working with the client with a faith can work. But if you find any psychotic behaviors in the client, which are screaming, yelling, or completely having disorientation to the reality, maybe I would say that, okay, this client requires some other professional support.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's important. Yes.
And in these difficult times, unfortunately, a lot of people are engaging in substance abuse in patterns that are very unhealthy. And if something like that was brought to my attention, I would encourage them to seek help from an addiction specialist, for example, and just if that's outside of my territory. Sometimes coaching can happen at the same time as someone seeking other help, like they could seek financial assistance elsewhere with an expert in that area. So as always, as coaches, I think we need to know what our boundaries are in terms of our expertise.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm aware that we are almost at the top of the hour. One thing that I want to share with everybody is Dr. Paris and his partner has actually created a program of 10 episodes, a video program on mental health, which is available for free because they are on a mission to impact 500 million people in 5 years. I have taken that program and I found it extremely easy to understand. You don't need to be a coach to understand that. I encourage that you share that in your network. It's free. It is very simply explained a lot of things that happen to us in daily life and how can you become aware and how can you work with that. So it's actually a gift that it's really kind of them to create a program like that and offer it. So maybe we can spread it in our network for people to benefit from that. Great. So it was an amazing conversation. I really want to say thank you to both of you for making yourself available and to go through all the questions with us. We have missed Ram in the conversation. I'm sure it would have been more value added there, but I think it was a quite a bit of stretch for both of you to go through impromptu questions at the moment. But really, thank you for dealing with this. We will be sending an email to all the participants who registered with your email IDs. In case they have further questions, they can reach out to you and ask those questions which they might have not been able to ask today. So with all the regard and gratitude, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody. Namaste.
Thank you.